All right, let us continue. Miss Johnson, you still with me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Jennings.
Yes, I still am.
All right, good. All right, so we were looking at the arteries, right? Just recapping and then we'll move forward. So arteries carry blood from the heart. Arteries carry blood from the heart to all body tissues. Okay, Miss Jackson, noted. Aorta branches into the coronary arteries. Coronary arteries supply the heart muscle. The carotid arteries supply the brain. Hepatic arteries supply the liver. Renal arteries supply the kidneys. Mesenteric arteries, the intestines. Pulmonary artery carries oxygen-poor blood to the lungs. Arteries branch into smaller arteries and then into arterioles. Arterioles branch into a series of increasingly smaller vessels until they connect to the capillaries. So it's a closed network. Remember the connections. Pulse, palpated most easily at the neck, wrist, or groin. Created by a forceful pumping of the blood out of the left ventricle and into the major arteries. Arteries, yeah. Don't kill yourself too much to learn all of these arteries. Learn the main ones that will occur throughout the course. After the course ends, anatomy and physiology will be something that is ongoing. So I would encourage you to invest in an anatomy and physiology textbook if you are going to take EMS as a career. Capillaries connect arteries to venules, fine end divisions of arterial system, allow contact between blood and cells. Very important vessel or vessels, capillaries. Veins return oxygen depleted blood to the heart. The superior vena cava carries blood returning from the head, neck, shoulders, and upper extremities. The inferior vena cava carries blood from the abdomen, pelvis, and lower extremities. Join at the right atrium. So the inferior and superior vena cava joins at the right atrium. The spleen, very important organ. It's a solid organ located under the rib cage and it filters blood, right? The spleen also stores a supply of blood in case our body goes into shock. It is particularly susceptible to injury from blunt trauma and it can lead to significant blood loss internally. Blood composition, we know this by now. So the liquid is the plasma, red blood cells is the erythrocytes, which are important to the process of oxygenation. White blood cells are leukocytes, which their role is to fight infection within the body, and platelets are important to the clotting process. Now, red blood cells are not able to move on their own. They need plasma to move around the body. White blood cells are able to move wherever there's a problem inside of the body. All right, so circulatory system physiology. Blood pressure. Pressure that blood exerts against the wall of the arteries, right? So you have, in order for blood to effectively circulate around the body, there must be an adequate pressure within the body to push that blood around so that it can go to what we would consider to be vital organs and the rest of the body. So we need an adequate blood pressure, right? And that is influenced by the contraction and relaxation of the ventricles and how much blood is entering the ventricles and how fast the heart is pumping. So there is a systolic phase and a diastolic phase. So you have systole and diastole, and the blood pressure is written as a fraction, right? So blood pressure is written as a fraction. The systolic phase is the pressure created when the ventricles are contracting to push the blood out. Diastolic pressure is created when the ventricles are contracting, but the pressure, the blood is flowing against a pressure inside of the aorta, right? So that's the blood pressure. The systolic blood pressure would be the high point of the wave. The diastolic blood pressure would be the low point of the wave. And as I say, it's written as a fraction. So hold on, let me clear this up. I use a black. Right, so the top would indicate the systolic pressure. That's your systolic pressure. And the bottom would indicate your diastolic pressure, right? That's how it is written. Top number is your systolic pressure, bottom number is the diastolic pressure. Now, you might come across the term preload and afterload pressures. So you may see preload and afterload. So let me explain what that is. The preload pressure is a pressure that is created when the ventricle expands. So there's a pressure that is created inside of the ventricle before it contracts, right? I always tell students, think of it as a gun loading. You're loading the gun to fire. So there's a pressure that's built up before the ventricle contracts. That is the pressure that we call the preload. So that's a preloading pressure, right? The afterload pressure is the pressure that is created inside of the aorta that the blood is moving against, because the aorta is constricted. So it's constricting to push the blood, and the blood must flow against that constriction. So there's a pressure that is created, and that is called the afterload. Ensure that you're familiar with those two terms, preload and afterload pressure. Yes, go ahead, Miss Nesbitt.
Sir, can you go over preload and afterload?
All right. Let me switch to my whiteboard. Let me switch to the whiteboard. Are you able to see the whiteboard? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to be using my drawing skills. I have good drawing skills, but with the whiteboard, the drawing skills not that great, right? So that thing that I just drew is the heart. Hope you can see that arrow. All right, so this would be the heart. So this is the heart. Everybody can see that?
Yes, sir.
Everybody see that? Good.
Yes,
All right, so for the heart, for blood to reach the various areas of the body, the heart must be able to stretch to a certain distance. Now, the greater that stretch, the greater the contraction. Now, when it stretches, blood is collected inside of the heart, and a pressure is built up. So there's a pressure that is building up, right? The blood that's coming in is causing the heart to stretch, and it's building up. There's a pressure building up before it contracts, right? That pressure that is building up before the contraction is referred to as preload, right? So that's the preload pressure. Now the afterload, I'll go back to my pencil. So this is the aorta. So this is the aorta, right? So when blood enters the aorta, there is a pressure that is created, right? There's a pressure that is created. So the aorta is constricted. It constricts, and a pressure is created when it constricts. And the blood is moving forward. So the blood is moving in this direction, right? Now, as the blood moves forward, there's a pressure that it is flowing against. It's flowing against that pressure that is being created by the constriction. That is what we call afterload, right? So this is your, oops, man, I messed up my drawing. But the top one is your preload pressure. The bottom would be the afterload. So let me recap. The pressure that is created before the ventricle contracts is the preload. The pressure that the blood is flowing against inside the aorta when it is constricted is the afterload pressure. And these are pressures that will contribute to the blood pressure, right? And that's my, I hope that cleared up, Miss Nesbitt. If not, let me know.
Sir, why I'm asking is really the afterload that I'm having a difficulty grasping, because the book said that the afterload is the same as the diastolic pressure, which
Right, in this context, right? So remember, this is the heart, right? And let's say this is the aorta. Yes. So when the ventricle has contracted and it's relaxing, it means the blood is outside of it. The blood would be inside the aorta now, right? So the ventricle has relaxed, it's emptied, the blood is inside the aorta. That is the diastolic phase, because the diastolic phase is when the ventricle relaxes. And when the ventricle relaxes, the blood is now in the aorta and it is moving against a pressure inside of the aorta. That is the afterload, right? The preload is before contraction. The afterload is after contraction. You follow me?
Just get.
All right, good. Anybody have any question? No questions. All right. Let me get back to the PowerPoints. No question while I am getting back to the PowerPoints. What do you think would occur if the preload pressure if the preload pressure decreases? What would happen? Anybody want to answer that? You can raise your hand. So the preload pressure is not sufficient, so enough blood is not coming into the heart to stretch the muscle, right? So the preload pressure is low. What do you think would occur? Anybody want to try? Yes, Mr. Jennings, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
If the preload pressure is low, then and without that expansion, the ventricles, you might have a decrease in blood flow going out of the left or any ventricle. You'd have a decrease in blood going out, and if you have a decrease in blood going out, then you might end up in the same situation of not enough blood getting around the body.
Excellent, excellent. You finish?
They keep it short, so I'm trying to keep it short.
Okay, okay. Miss Nesbitt, go ahead. Miss Nesbitt.
Would it also decrease, as in would it lead to weak ventricular contractions as well?
Yes. So the contractions would not be as strong as before, right? And the heart rate would go up. So yes, that would be correct. Anybody else want to add anything to that? It's an interactive thing I deal with, you know. So I need to learn to be more interactive. All right, now normal circulation. Normal circulation. Automatically adjusted and controlled. What does that mean? It means that, remember, in order for the blood to circulate to what we would consider to be core organs, right? The brain, the lungs, the heart, kidneys, and the rest of the body, we must have an adequate blood pressure, right? And that blood pressure changes based on demand. So your blood pressure will change based on demand. What does that mean? It means that if you are lying down in comparison to when you're sitting, your blood pressure is going to be different. So if I'm lying down, my blood pressure would be lower than when I'm sitting up. If I'm standing, my blood pressure would be higher in comparison to when I'm sitting. If I'm walking, my blood pressure would be different in comparison to me just remaining one place. If I'm running, my blood pressure would go up in comparison to me walking. So depending on the type of activity that you're doing, your body will adjust the tone of your blood vessels to ensure that adequate blood flow or pressure is reaching all areas of the body. So it will adjust to meet the demand because the end goal is perfusion, right? And perfusion is the exchange of oxygen and nutrients and the removal of CO2 and waste from the cells within the body so that they can carry out their normal metabolic function, right? So once we have all the components that the blood needs, the heart is working good, the blood vessel is working good, we have good preload, good afterload pressure, and the respiratory system is functioning effectively, we will get good perfusion to the cells and tissues within the body, right? Excuse me. So blood enters organs and tissues through arteries. Blood leaves organs and tissues through veins. Right? Now, if you know what is normal circulation, then inadequate circulation would be the reverse of that. Yes? Quite so. Quite so. So my question to you is, if well, I don't even need to ask that question because you people are too bright for that one. So inadequate circulation in adults. The system can adjust to small blood loss, right? So if there is something that is wrong with the fluid component, which is the blood, patient has a injury, there is a loss of blood, so we don't have enough blood volume, right? And adult blood volume is what, 5 to 6 liters of blood. So there is a loss of blood volume. When the blood volume drops, so if there is a drop in blood volume within the blood vessels, the first thing that the body is going to do is constrict the blood vessels. When the blood vessels constrict, just like when you kink a hose, the pressure increases inside of it, right? So blood vessels constrict, pressure increase, the blood pressure will try to remain at the body is trying to keep the blood pressure at a level that can still supply the core organs and the rest of the body. If that mechanism fails, right? So if there is constriction vessel and the blood pressure is trying to maintain a level that is sufficient, but the blood that is being lost is not being replaced, then ultimately that is going to lead to shock. And shock is the reverse of perfusion. So shock is the reverse of perfusion. So if you know what perfusion is, shock would be the opposite of that, right? So it's the inadequate exchange of oxygen and nutrients, and it's the inadequate exchange of waste and carbon dioxide. So you have more waste and carbon dioxide building up in the body, which is not good, right? Because the cells won't be able to create the amount of energy that is required, and ultimately the cardiovascular system will collapse if shock is not reversed, right? So that would be inadequate circulation. Now, functions of the blood. Perfusion transporting oxygen, transporting carbon dioxide, transporting waste and nutrients, and clotting or coagulation, right? That's the functions. Now, the system that is up next, well, we don't reach that system yet. So the last portion of the cardiovascular system that you need to be familiar with is that the nervous system plays a role in the control of the cardiovascular system. The specific portion of the nervous system that can play a role or control the heart is the sympathetic nervous system, which falls under the autonomic nervous system. So it's really the autonomic nervous system, which has two divisions. It has what is called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So work with me. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight or flight response, right? It is sometimes referred to as the adrenergic system, right? So it sends commands to the adrenal gland, and we get the production of adrenaline and noradrenaline. So listen carefully. Listen very carefully. So, adrenaline and epinephrine is the same thing, right? You will see the word. You will see either epi or adrenaline. More persons are familiar with adrenaline. Some persons are familiar with epinephrine. It's the same thing, right? When you see norepinephrine and noradrenaline, it is the same thing. So if you see norepinephrine and noradrenaline, you're seeing is the same thing, right? All right, good. Now, when there is an issue in the body, right, with the cardiovascular system, the autonomic nervous system is going to be triggered, specifically the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the first thing that comes out is going to be norepinephrine or noradrenaline, right? And norepinephrine or noradrenaline affects alpha receptors. So it affects alpha receptors in the blood vessels, right? Alpha receptors. Now, receptors are protein sites that are found on the blood vessels, right? So when they are stimulated, a specific function is created, or a specific action is initiated, right? So when the alpha receptors that are found on the blood vessels are stimulated, it causes the blood vessels to constrict. So anytime your body feels that your blood pressure is low, the first thing your body does is produce norepinephrine and noradrenaline to constrict your blood vessels to increase your heart rate, right? The epinephrine now, or adrenaline, when epinephrine or adrenaline is produced by the body, it will stimulate beta 1 and beta 2 receptors right? So when epinephrine or adrenaline is released, it will stimulate beta 1 beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. And there is an easy way to remember this. Just remember that you have one heart, two lungs. You have one heart, two lungs. So beta 1 receptors are found in the heart. Beta 2 receptors are found in the lungs. Right? When beta 1 receptors are stimulated in the heart, they increase all the function. It causes all of the functions of the heart to increase. It increases the strength of contraction, the rate of contraction, and the rate or speed of electrical conduction. I will repeat that again. When the body produces epinephrine or adrenaline, it will stimulate beta 1 receptors in the heart. When the beta 1 receptors are stimulated in the heart muscle, it increases all of the functions of the heart. The strength of contraction, the rate of contraction, and the rate or speed of electrical conduction. When the body produces epinephrine and adrenaline and it stimulates beta 2 receptors that are found in the lungs, it will open up the air passage so that more air can come into the lungs that contains oxygen. So the body is trying to increase the oxygenation within the body, right? And that is why we give epinephrine to a patient that is having a severe allergic reaction that is affecting their ability to breathe, because it's going to open up the air passage. If you have any question, just raise your hand. All right, so very important slide. Ensure that you spend some time with that information. So blood vessels have alpha adrenergic receptors. The heart and lungs have beta adrenergic receptors. And remember, we have one heart, two lungs, right? So beta 1 is in the heart, beta 2 is in the lungs, right? Now, the other component is the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, this is how I remember it. So, let me click on my pencil and my colors. Just remember that for me, that S represents speed, right? So for me, the S represents speed. So the sympathetic nervous system speeds up things in the body, right? It's gonna speed up stuff in the body. The parasympathetic, let me move to the next slide. The parasympathetic, again, let me get my colors going. Here's our S. I don't want text. Here is the S is right here. The S represents speed, but the word, the prefix para means half. So it would be half speed. So the parasympathetic nervous system slows down things, right? So it slows down the heart function, right? This is the system that chips in when you take your lunch break and you eat that nice lunch, and when you come back you start to get sleepy, right? When you're sleeping at nights, it's your parasympathetic. It's the rest and digest portion of the autonomic nervous system, right? And the sympathetic and parasympathetic work together to balance each other out, right? So they create a state of balance or homeostasis within the body. They contribute to that state of balance. All right, so we finally get to the nervous system. So the nervous system, anatomy and physiology. The nervous system is perhaps the most complex organ in the body. I would agree. It is indeed a very complex system, but my favorite is still the heart. Divided into two main portions. So you have the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and you have the peripheral nervous system, which consists of your cranial nerves and spinal nerves, right? Now let's look at the central nervous system. So the brain, there are three main portions of the brain that you need to be familiar with. You have the cerebrum, you have the cerebellum, and you have the brainstem, right? So these are the main areas of the brain that you need to be familiar with for this course. Now, the cerebrum, which is the largest portion of the brain, is responsible for all of the functions that we have to think about. So everything that we need to think about is going to be the cerebrum, right? That's the cerebrum. The cerebellum, right, which is referred to as the midbrain in some books, but technically it's not really, right? But in some texts you will see it referred to as the midbrain. It's smaller than the cerebrum, right? And its role, an easy way to remember the function of the cerebellum is you will focus on the B and L. So I focus on the B and L in cerebellum to remember balance and coordinated movement. So the cerebellum is responsible for balance and coordinated movement. The brainstem, which is the smallest portion of the brain and the most well protected, is responsible for all life-sustaining function. That's why it has to be well protected. Everything that keeps us alive is a brainstem, right? All life-sustaining functions. The spinal cord. So we're still on the central nervous system. Spinal cord. It is an extension of the brainstem, right? So the spinal cord is the connection between the brain and the rest of the body. This is how the body this is how the brain communicates with the rest of the body, right? And if you can look at that diagram to the side, you can see where the spinal cord exits the foramen magnum, and as it comes down you have nerves branching off, that go to the upper extremity, and nerves branching off that goes to the lower extremity. That's your spinal nerves. Now, the peripheral nervous system is divided into the somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, right? So the nervous system consists of the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral. Peripheral means to be away from, right? The peripheral nervous system is divided into the somatic nervous system and autonomic. The somatic nervous system is responsible for relaying signals from the brain to the muscles within your body. So you will get voluntary muscle movement from the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system divides into the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and we spoke about that on the previous slide. One is the fight or flight, the other is the rest and digest. So just recapping, somatic nervous system transmits signals from the brain to the voluntary muscles. However, even though the somatic nervous system is a voluntary system, you can have a spinal reflex action, right? Meaning the signal bypasses the brain, don't go to the brain. So if I picked up something that was hot, I'm not going to hold it and have a thought process, right? I'm not going to hold that thing that is hot and say, okay, this feels hot in my hands, my fingers are burning up, I probably should let it go, you know. Yeah, man, I need to let it go. That's not going to happen, right? You pick it up, it's hot, signals are sent to the spinal cord and back to the muscles, and you release it. That's a spinal reflex. It doesn't go to the brain, right? The autonomic nervous system is involuntary, so the brain does not directly control the autonomic nervous system. It splits into two areas: the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, right? Now, two types of nerves are within the peripheral nervous system. You have the sensory nerves, which carries information from the body to the brain, from the body to the brain. That's sensory. And you have motor nerves that carry information from the brain to the body, right? That's your motor nerves. And that is what you need to know for now for the peripheral nervous system. There will be more as we go deeper into the course, especially when we look at neurologic emergencies. All right, next system is the skin. Now, before we talk about the skin, you can take we're going to take a 10-minute break. All right, so we're gonna take another break, take a break, drink some water, grab a snack if you can, and we will get back at it. So we will start back at 11. We will start back at that time.